Neel, thanks for joining me on the Housing News Podcast.
Hey man, I'm stoked to be here. This is fun. I was just telling you, I started hearing your stuff and been a fan of the podcast. So then I was like, man, I gotta collaborate with Clayton. So I shot you a DM, and then a couple weeks later, here we are.
Dude, it was perfect timing because I think one of the most important topics of 2023 is some of this entrepreneurial focus and having the right mindset and preparing yourself and preparing your business for, what might be a tough year in 2023 for some businesses, but there will be a trough and there will be another side of this. And without the right preparation, without having the right tools in the toolkit, without the right mindset, people will miss that opportunity to grow as this market, finds its footing.
100%. And, you've talked to people who have been in the game. You've been in the game for a while, and I've been in this industry, 20 years now, and it's all about peaks and valleys. And the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And it's a roller coaster of cycles. And it makes people nauseous a little bit now, when you see these extremes.
I just got back this afternoon from Las Vegas. I was out for the ICE Experience Conference, used to be the Ellie Mae Experience Conference, and had that conversation with more than a few executives. And it's pretty clear when you kind of get up to some of the C-suite leaders who have been through multiple cycles, that 20 and 30 year horizon. There's preparation, but there's still a confidence level that, hey, we know how to navigate a cycle. We'll figure out how to use it to build a stronger business on the other side. I mean, it doesn't mean that people aren't a little bit hesitant and aren't reducing cost and doing the things that are necessary. There's a level of confidence that I've kind of found exhilarating, to tell you the truth. I was traveling with my wife and I was on the plane this afternoon, and I'm just like, hey, I don't always feel different coming back from events, but this event, I'm coming back feeling aggressive and motivated. I'm ready to put my foot on the gas.
And I think the reason why you see that kind of confidence now is they've been through it before, but then anybody who ran their business well probably saved a few nickels over the last, couple of years, right? That 2020, 2021 cycle was a boom like I had never seen before. I mean, it was insane. And right. So there was a lot of just excess as far as earnings go, but at the same time, not the excess as far as what I'm seeing from the seasoned group of hey, let's plan for the future. This ride will end. We're used to this ups and downs. So this is great, but we know what's coming. And no matter how many times that cycle, it still catches you a little bit off guard. And this one did, because of the speed at which rates rose. I mean, we went from 3 to 6 in probably I don't remember, 60, 90-day window. That is historical. I mean, that speed of the rise, right? So it's not necessarily saying that 6 and 7% rates are the death knell. Well, not necessarily, but when you go from 3 to 6 in 2-3 months, the market doesn't have a time to adjust. And then you're in shock for the next 90 days, right? Because everything's trying to catch up.
Yeah, that kind of velocity is what shocks the market. And it's history repeats itself, but it doesn't always look the same. And this was a level of velocity we haven't seen before.
Yeah, so that caught people a little bit off guard. But once you adjusted, so now we're rates started really rising second half of 2022, and they continued into the end of 2022, and then we saw a little relief in January. And I literally see people's moods change based on inflation data now. You see good inflation data, meaning it's coming down. People start getting really hyped up for the future. But I think they've come to terms with now. Okay, we see this. We see that mortgage rates are tracking inflation. We listen to Logan. We know how this works. Okay. So we know that when inflation cools off, here's what's going to happen. Also, I think a lot of people, once they dug into the data, they got comfortable with the fact that the market isn't going to crash. This isn't another '08 scenario. So I think now, we're into this a little bit. The true players, the weak players got shook out, and that has to happen. I think we reached a peak in terms of licensed LOs in April of last year. So that had to come down a little bit, which is normal for any market. But I think now the guys who are there who are looking ahead, right? They know right now we're in a tough season, but they're looking to the second half of this year. And when I look to the second half of this year, I'm pretty pumped up about the opportunities ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm excited too. We were just talking about some of our plans for our event, HousingWire Annual. I'll have to, let me know if you have any ideas here, but we're trying to like build a theme around like there will be a trough at some point in 2023, and when our event in October, it could very well be timed as kind of like the starting line of the next run of the next cycle, the upswing of origination volume and a healthier market for mortgage and real estate professionals. So we're trying to kind of build around that idea that, hey, we're not blind to the fact that 2023 is going to be tough, but there is another side of this, and I'm in this game for the long haul.
Yep.
The folks who read Housing Wire and come to our events are in this for the long haul. The folks that are loyal to Forward Academy and your Forward event that we'll go deeper into are in it for the long haul. So like, how do those people use this year to build, to get stronger, to get the right people around them? Like, that's the stuff you can't lose in a down cycle.
100%. And, you talked about a little bit of mindset, and I think that is so important. It sounds kind of hokey, how's your mindset going to help when the market is what it is? Well, I'll tell you what, deals are still closing. There's still opportunities out there. There's things to look forward to. There's things to get ready for. And if you are talking to people who are like, man, this is terrible, rates are going to go double digits and who knows what's going to happen then. And, we're in for, some of these wild scenarios, right? You're going to be negative and you're not going to see, those opportunities. So I found that by at least being around these people who are like, okay, yeah, it's a tough season, but we're going to get through it. And also here's the opportunities we're seeing in the current market. Here's how we can survive. And here's how we can thrive in the next upswing. And making sure you're having those types of conversations. Those are the people you're listening to. Those are the podcasts you're listening to. Those are the people's content you're following on social, because I don't want to be delusional either, but I think you do need to be optimistic, because if not, you'll find all you see are the negative stuff. There's plenty of negativity out there. So it's like, what are you looking for? Whatever you're looking for, you're going to find in the market.
So Neel, for our audience who doesn't know you, you're pretty prolific on social, hundreds of thousands of followers. Like, I think is Instagram your most engaged account? Is that where you get the most action?
Yeah, 100%. Because obviously Instagram took off for me first, and because of short form content, really, and because of the community building aspect on Instagram. So it's a little different than, like, I'm an older guy, I'm in my 40s now. I still have a TikTok, but I'm not really, like, I don't relate to it as much as I do with my audience on Instagram, because Instagram is like, millennials. By the way, I'm a millennial by 1 year. I got it 1981. I'm the oldest millennial in the room normally, but it's the biggest segment of millennials on that platform right now. And there's a great community building feature because you have feed content, you have stories, and you have direct messages. And it's a great way to stay in contact and really build a really cool community.
My team at Housing Wire calls me a geriatric millennial, and I'm 85. You're like really geriatric, man.
Tell them that Neil's got you beat. Yeah. Just barely made it.
Okay, so to frame this conversation, and I'll preface this. I know you kind of flywheel your content. I use some of like your Instagram content on Twitter. I follow you on Twitter, and Twitter works better for this conversation purposes. So
okay.
I pulled some of the tweets that I thought were really interesting, and this one kind of flows right into you talking about like age and mindset. So there's a tweet that you posted: things I know in my 40s that I wish I knew when I was 21. And it kind of goes into your circle directly reflects who you are as a person. If you're friends with broke people, you'll stay poor. Friends with smokers, you'll smoke soon. Friends with alcoholics, it's a matter of time until you drink. Same goes for rich, successful, and happy. Thought that was a really powerful message. So tell us a little bit more about the things that you've learned that you know in your 40s now that you wish you knew 20 years ago when you were starting in the mortgage industry.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's obviously being around the right people who are thinking about growth, who are thinking about new ways to do things, innovating, and then all of a sudden you start. So like, I didn't consider myself a really creative person, but when I started following people and learning from people who are creative, I got better at it. I remember even on Twitter, you bring up, right? I wanted to get better at writing. So I started tweeting. And so if somebody told me the other day, like, hey, Neel, you just now are starting to get some engagement on Twitter. How did that happen? Well, I went to my main page and I look at the top and it says there's 5,200 and some odd tweets. So I just screenshotted that and I was like, here, this is how you get good at Twitter. You literally tweet 5,000 times over 3 years. And then eventually your writing isn't bad. Like it's decent, right? And then now I still have a lot to learn, but yeah, it's just being around the right people, doing new things. And the reason I started doing that was because I got burnt out on a lot of the traditional stuff. But Clayton, I started doing that stuff 38. So like, I wish I would have started. Imagine where I'd be if I started doing that when I was 28, right? And so it's never too late. By the way, I had a guy speak at my event recently to my group which is like a high level group of realtors and LOs. And this guy's in his 50s. His name is Chris Doe, and he didn't start his YouTube channel till the late 40s. And it's blown up, and he's changed his whole life, and he loves what he does, and he's educating, millions of people, millions of subscribers on YouTube now. And he didn't learn that until late 40s. And so I don't think it's ever too late. But the thing is, I wish I would have done it a decade before. I wish I would have, started trying new things and learning more. I think that's the biggest thing that when you talk to anybody who's found success with anything, if you ask them what's their one regret, like, I don't have any regrets. I'm like, okay, well, foot to the fire. What is your one regret? I wish I would have started sooner. That's it. Right. So I wish I would have hung out with people who are doing X, Y, Z and learn from them. And so once I started that in my late 30s, it totally changed my business. I was able to, 10X my business and income and team size, and opened up all these new opportunities where I was able to start an education company. I mean, I never thought I'd be an educator. I was an introvert. Like, I don't even post anything on social media. And all of a sudden now I'm teaching people about how to do that. Right. So all these kind of opportunities that you don't even know exist can be there for you if you're around the right types of people and if you're consuming the right type of content. So I love Twitter for that purposes. You can really curate your feed. I know it's a little hokey with the algorithm now. Sometimes you get weird stuff there, but for the most part, you can follow the right people and you can get the right messages,
So when you talk about surrounding yourself with the right people, and like that message of the same goes for rich, successful, and happy. And I recognize this might kind of get into pretty personal territory,
Sure.
but how have you, what decisions have you had to make to prioritize spending time with people that you want to model match, that you look up to, and that you'd be happy and excited to be like at a point in your life, and then reduce the time you spend with people who, may pull you into bad habits or put you in a mindset that isn't where you want to be for yourself or your family?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think I had friends, coming up. Everybody has that friend who's kind of like wants to go out and drink and party and do all these things. And maybe you don't want to be pulled there because you're trying to get healthy now, or maybe you're trying to, improve your life in another way, and you don't want to fall back into those things. So kind of not saying like, hey dude, I'm cutting you out of my life, but just say, hey man, I'm just going to redirect my energy elsewhere. And, people get the point of like, hey man, they stop like reaching out to you to be that person. So if, for example, you're someone, and I was someone like this, who had a lot of people who would just who just want to talk crap, just want to talk shit, complain about the world, politics, all this stuff. And I'll get into that conversation once in a while, everyone, but I don't really like it because it leaves you feeling kind of negative, right? And it changes your whole mindset into this cycle of negativity, which is not good for anybody. So I would just limit my time with those people. And I know some of them were in my family, like extended family, like cousins, brothers, sisters, like not close family, but like you might have people in your family where you do hang out, and there's this guy who's always complaining about everything. And, so I would just limit my time with those people. And then I started focusing more on where are the people obviously already that are in my network that are positive and doing new things and focused on improving themselves. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be super rich. Like I know a guy who is not rich in terms of health, but in terms of wealth, but he is super healthy with like the gym every day, and he has a great relationship with his wife and kids. So that to me is rich too, right? I want to be like that around that guy more, because it makes me want to get my ass in the gym in the morning, and it makes me want to have a better relationship with my family, right? So there's people like that. And I was like, okay, I want to hang around more people like this. And then somebody's crushing it at business. I want to hang around more people like this. And then what I found was I wanted to meet people who are higher level people in business and in our industry and outside of our industry, just in business in general, marketing people, some of the speakers at my events that you've seen. Like I wanted to get into those circles. Well, how do you get into those circles if they don't even know you, right? So I think one way I did that was just by getting good at something, right? And for me, it was marketing and content. And then you can offer to provide value to people. And some of the value could be just connecting people with other people who could help them, or it could be hosting events, and you're just literally the host of the party. I remember first time I got to meet you in person, I invited you to come to one of my events. It just kind of worked out timing wise. I sent you a DM and said, hey man, I'm doing this Epic event. We have some mutual friends that are going to be there. Tom's going to be there. Phil Trevor's going to be there. Would you want to go? And you're like, yeah, actually I can go. And I think I gave you like 4 days notice or something, but you showed up. And then I got to hang out with you. And like, so, look to do things that people would want to be a part of, have skills that you could maybe offer to other people. And I found that the best way to network with people who you'd like to get to know is just to offer them some value. It's pretty simple. You want to connect with higher level people. Well, just do something that they would want to be a part of, or offer them to help in some way, add value to their life in some shape or form, or have mutual connections. So I just really started focusing on those types of connections. Who do I know that you would know? Hey, Clayton, would you mind introducing me to so-and-so? I saw you guys on a thing. And don't be afraid to ask, because if you find my stuff valuable and I'm a good dude, you'll introduce me, right? And so then that can really take you to these new connections. So I've done that intentionally for the past 3-4 years. I never did that earlier in life. I started doing that recently, and it's been a game changer.
And that's like a perfect lead into another one of your pieces of content that I also found very interesting and inspirational. So you shared that at age 35, you were drowning in debt, multiple failed businesses, and a family that wasn't proud of you. That's a strong statement. Then at 40, I'm a millionaire, run many successful businesses, and now have a family who believes in me fully. So it sounds like this timeline of surrounding yourself with the right people has had more benefits than just professionally. I mean, this is like reverberating into how you think about yourself and your happiness at home.
Yeah, 100%. It's like, you get into that cycle of negativity. You're not looking for opportunities. You're not really trying. And then all of a sudden you find yourself like, hey, maybe I'm not making as much money as I should be, especially if you're in commission only sales, like many of us are, right? Like, or maybe you try a side hustle or a business and it fails because it just, you didn't really get traction and you gave up, right? And so then you're constantly like in this thing where you're letting yourself down. And I think it kind of gets you in this negativity. And then, if you're not really, for me personally, if I'm not doing well in business and finance and in my goals, I'm not feeling very good about myself. And then also like that translates to all your other relationships, right? So it can be this kind of negative cycle. And so once you snap out of that and you start putting some wins on the board and getting some points on the board, you can quickly reverse that whole thing into the opposite. And it's crazy how that momentum builds. And I remember even doing my event recently, I was like, man, at the event you were at in 2021, which was hard to do because that was the middle of the pandemic. Like you couldn't, I remember trying to get a venue. They're like, man, get out of here. You can't host events in 2021. Like, what are you, crazy?
What's what you did it at Brad Lee's like personal office, right?
Yeah. I remember like, hey, I'm going to pull this off. I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So I get Bradley, my friend, to let me use this facility because it's private and they won't, we don't have to deal with all the rules. Hopefully I didn't break any laws, but I said, okay, I'm going to do it there. And then I'm going to get Tom and I'm going to, pay these speakers and reach out to people. I'm going to get people to come speak at this and I'm going to get it catered. I'm going to spend all this money and figure it out. And how many tickets have you sold? Neil, how are you going to get people there? Well, I haven't sold any tickets. I'll figure it out though. You know what I mean? Put some pressure on your shoulders. And then what I found was it was really hard, but it just personally invited people and I got there. And I remember thinking at that event, like, oh man, this is amazing. I like pulled this off. I didn't lose a bunch of money on an event, which is normally, if you ever do events, your first event is usually a money losing proposition because of all the costs associated with events. I was like, man, I didn't really get hurt that bad there. I got to meet with people and I did it. Pulled off an event that people flew from all around the country to see. And it was in the middle of a pandemic and it was great. Cool. Then I was like, man, it doesn't get any better than this. And then next year I did the same thing, but 10 times bigger with even bigger speakers. And, I spent probably $500,000 on that event from my own pocket, right, to put that thing on. And it was wildly successful. Like people, I was looking at feedback from it from last year because we're setting up the website for this year's event. And the feedback was insane. Like, and this like unsolicited feedback, people sending you messages of like, man, that's one of the best events I've been to, or the best event I've been to. I learned so much. And thank you so much for doing this. You're doing so much for our industry. And it's just because it's different, and so like, yeah, I think of like that momentum. Like you start with putting something on the board. Like, what could I do this week? Well, this week I could probably host a little meetup. So what's your goal? My goal is to, host bigger events and make an impact in our industry. Okay, well, let's start somewhere. Because if I look at the last event, I'd be like, how the heck can I get there? And a lot of people just see that and they're like, oh, I want to do that. Well, they didn't see the fact that I did like 14, 15 ones before the first one where nobody showed up. And then I got 14 to 20 events where maybe 8 to 10 people showed up. And then I got a little bit better and I didn't suck from speaking. Like you start to get slightly better, you improve your network. It's just like that momentum keeps building. And then you get more confident too. And then I think that confidence leads into now you get more business. Now you do have the confidence to start that side business and it takes off and you just start winning more. I think like winning in and of itself is like a momentum thing.
And so I think like one of the things that makes you unique is that you're not just a content creator, and like the content creation takes a lot of time. Event organization takes a lot of time. You also originate mortgages. And so like the value you're bringing to the audience, the value you're bringing to your followers is the expertise that you've developed with 20 years in the mortgage industry. So as you thought about branching outside of the playbook you had been following for the first 15 years of your career, were you thinking about like mortgage industry objectives? Like, all right, this event's going to help me recruit, or this event's going to help me build relationships with my referral partners? Or were you thinking this is business diversification? Like what mindset did you go into this stage of your career with?
Yeah. So 2018 was like that kind of low point of like, hey, and if you remember, anybody listening or watching, 2018 was a bad year for the industry. A lot of layoffs. Wasn't anything as bad as last year, but there was definitely rates had gone up into the fives, and sounds kind of cool right now to say fives. I wish we were in the fives, but I remember at the time it was like, man, this is a tough year and it was slow. And I was like, I need to do something different. So I started doing the content stuff. But when I got into starting to do events and micro events, I was thinking first and foremost, I could use it as a way to get more referral partners. Like what do real estate partners need? They would love help with marketing and growing their business. Like that's their number one need. If you ask any agent, like what's your number one need in business right now? I need more escrows. I need more clients. Okay, cool. Well, what if I hosted a little workshop where we could do things that would get you more clients, where you could learn some new tactics, right? So in the beginning, it was like, hey, let's get realtor partners there and let's educate them, right? And help them. And then follow up afterwards and you maybe get some business out of this whole thing, right? And it was more like, hey, just give value. This is a high level of giving value. And then also saw that, hey, if I am somebody who's not known and I'm not a speaker, how do I accelerate that factor of like being known in the marketplace? Well, you could be the host of the event. Like say I want to be a speaker at all these events. Well, nobody's going to call me to speak because they don't know who I am. They don't know about my expertise. And maybe I'm not even an expert yet. And maybe I suck at speaking. Well, you don't have to be the best speaker and the best teacher in order to just host the event. So my first thinking was like, what if I just brought in some great minds and my speech maybe is not the best one of the day, but I'm the host, and that was how I was thinking. So
along your stage time that way.
Yeah, like you literally nobody put you on their stage. You build your own stage. You know what I mean? So I started thinking like that, and I saw how people just treat you better, right? They're like, oh man, you hosted a great event. Would love to chat with you. Here's some more opportunity to come your way. Right? We're thinking about doing this development and would love to talk to you about it. Well, hey, why am I getting that conversation? Well, it's because they saw me doing all this cool stuff. Right. So I think in terms of my first thought was business development, but then what happened along the way was a lot of people within the industry started asking for help with the very same thing. They're like, hey, you do all these videos. How do you do that? And I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call and I'm happy to send people a DM response of the equipment I'm using, or here's a script idea or whatever. But it got to be the point where like maybe more than half of the messages I'm getting are from real estate and mortgage people asking how to do marketing better. So I'm like, man, this is literally, like there's a voice up there telling me, hey, you're teaching people things and they're asking for more and you can really help these people. So my first thing was like, okay, well, maybe I could put together a little course for these people. I was not trying to like, hey, I'm going to become a course seller and quit mortgages. I was just thinking, hey, I love this part of my job more than anything else. I love marketing. I love content creation. It's my passion. And I could help people within the industry do the same thing. Like not even about the money, right? So I remember making a first product that's worth thousands of dollars and selling it for $300, right? Just because it wasn't really about the money. It was just like, hey, how do I help more people? And that product is now turned into like, we have 1,000+ students. But in the beginning, it was just a small community of LOs and realtors who wanted to learn how they could do content better and how they could get results and grow their business. So that is how like I got into education, but I wasn't thinking I would do that from the beginning. It just sort of happened.
How has all of that experience changed your mortgage origination business? So if you found that internally you spend time in different places, more
Yeah.
time on marketing and public facing opportunities, and like how's it changed the makeup of your team, the size of your team? Like give us a little more insight there.
Yeah. So I grew in 18 to 20. I grew my team from like 3. It was like kind of like a mom and pop branch within a direct lender. And I grew that to 23 people just through personal brand. And, it wasn't really out there recruiting heavily, but just kind of selectively adding people and growing that. And we did a ton of business and did really well and still do. But what I kind of shifted along the way was like, okay, here's this education thing and personal brand building and education and trying to speak in more stages and do all that stuff. And then here's the mortgage business. Now, I would definitely make way more money if I just kept all my focus on mortgages, because I was making great money. Like how profitable this business is if you can scale it, right? It's hard to scale, but when you do scale it, it's amazing. It's like nothing else, right?
I vaguely remember you dropping a W-2
Yeah.
on your social media account a few years ago.
Yeah, because sometimes people would say, well, who are you to teach this stuff? And you probably don't do many loans. I'm like, well, actually I do. And you don't believe me? Here's my W-2. You know what I mean? Maybe that was a bad move. I don't remember. I don't do that anymore. But I remember at the time, people paying attention like, oh, okay, well, maybe I should listen to what Neel said because obviously it's working for his business. And I'll give him more credibility now that I saw proof, because there's so many people who talk about things on social, but maybe they're not really true practitioners of the thing. So then it's just theory. And everything I'm talking about is actual stuff I've done that worked and is still working today, right? So I wanted to make that distinction, which is why I did that. But yeah, like I would make way more there. So what happened was I kind of figured out, it sounds so cliche to even say this, but you start to make money and you're like, man, money is not the most important thing anymore. You know what I mean? And I feel even bad saying that because it's like just someone without it, they're probably thinking, dude, stop BSing, but it is true. Like
there's definitely a bar you have to clear before you can say that with a straight face. There's an income bar where you can start to have the luxury of that mindset.
Yeah, but what I found was, let's just say, for example, and many people can relate to this, and for some people that probably think it's like this is crazy. But let's just say you have met your needs financially, you make enough money to meet your stuff, and now you could go to the next level. What would change? And really what would change is you'd just probably have more stress and problems. You'd have more people like, you know what I mean? Now, if you got to like 2, 3, 4 levels ahead, then things could probably get crazy. Maybe then you don't have to go to the airport anymore. You could just fly private, and maybe you could do this and that, right? And maybe you get crazy, things happen and that could change. But I remember thinking like, hey, the difference between, a couple $1 million and $4 million or $6 million, like, and these sound like crazy numbers, but your life doesn't really change. Even like if you think about someone right now who adds an extra 100 grand to their income and they're already above that bar that you talked about, will that change anything for you? Probably not. Maybe you buy another investment or you throw it into your 401k or something for a rainy day, but like it doesn't really change. Like you're not waking up the next day thinking like, oh, I don't have to work anymore, or I'm not, I'm stress free. Like you probably even have more stress because you probably have other stuff going on. So I just thought, hey, at some point you got to do more of the things you like. And if those things are tied to business and growth, you're lucky. So if you ever in your business career find yourself in an opportunity where the thing that you love the most incidentally will pay you to do that thing, I think you're freaking obligated to pursue that opportunity because it is so lucky. Think about how many people just kind of deal with work and look forward to the weekends, and deal with work and look forward to the 2 weeks paid vacation every year. And it's not like their job is terrible, but they don't really love it. You know what I mean? So if you find something within this industry, which is a tough industry, that you absolutely love, and people will pay you to do that, I mean, I don't think it gets any better than that. So even if it's less money, I'm cool with that. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to shift half of my time from mortgage origination and managing loan officers to educating, because it's my passion and I love it more than anything. And incidentally, the thing I used to hate the most, which is public speaking, now I love the most, right? It's so fun for me because of the impact it makes if you do it well. So I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to do that. And then I just shifted. So now today, fast forward, like today, 2023, I spend half my time talking to clients, managing loan officers, worrying about guidelines and programs and interest rates. And then the other half of my time I spend on Forward, which is we have 1,000+ students in real estate and mortgage who want to use content to get better. And then we do micro events and big events every year.
So I'm out there like talking to lenders who are focused on trying to automate their originators'
Yeah.
social media accounts and have oversight of all the content that's created and concerned about compliance and brand and messaging. And you're playing a whole different game. So how have you figured out the dynamic, and were there any kind of speed bumps or potholes as you built this public persona and started to allocate your time 50% between the education and events business and the origination business, and how has that worked with the direct lender that you've been partnered with?
So incidentally, with me spending even half the time growing my brand and business, it leads to so many opportunities that come easy. So even though I'm spending less time on mortgage origination, I get opportunities that I would have never gotten. Like somebody will message you and say, "Hey, we're looking for a preferred lender for our team. Would you want to meet up?" And those opportunities used to take me years to get in the door, and somebody will hand them to you without even speaking to you now, because they've seen your videos, because they've seen and it's not just for a short period of time, it's for years, right? So I'm not like flexing. I'm just saying like that's the type of opportunity you can get if you build a powerful personal brand. And so that's really cool. So what happened is my relationship with the owner of my company, he understands that I'm not messing around, like I'm doing this at a higher level, and it actually helps my mortgage business. So he gives me that room to do it,
Did he see that in year one though?
No, for sure. So when you talk about speed bumps, yeah.
It's like, Neel, get your ass in here and tell me what the heck you're doing on
Yeah.
Instagram all day long. Like, was there ever that moment?
Yeah, for sure. He was not a believer. He was like, man, hey Neel, I know you're doing a lot of social, but make sure you take care of the clients and make sure you're doing this. And I'm like, yeah, Chris, I'm doing it. Don't worry. And so it took a time, but then when he saw that it was actually getting traction, then he believed. Same thing with like your family. Like, for example, many times you're like, well, these people, obviously my wife believes in me and she helps and supports me no matter what. But I remember her thinking for a while, like, hey, it's not profitable in the beginning. You're actually losing money. Okay. So you're spending money on videos and marketing and maybe even ads and maybe all these things, and you're not getting a direct return. So if you're spending all this time and I'm not seeing the fruits of that labor, hey, we got to have a conversation, right? And so you have to believe in the longer vision, which is probably why it's less common, right? Because it does take 6 months or a year or multiple years to really hit that hockey stick. I feel like it's an asymmetric opportunity, and we're used to symmetric opportunities, right? We're used to put in this, get this. And that's how we run yeah. And then this is an opportunity where the ceiling is literally gone. It could be $1 billion, just exaggerating, but it could be, right? But what you put in, you don't get out. And so it could be zero. Like somebody said, like, what's the ROI of a basketball? Well, if you're LeBron James, it's billions, right? Like, I don't know. But so what's the ROI of this phone? For me, it's millions of dollars, and it's just getting started. Like, it could be a lot down the road if you use it correctly. Could also waste your time and cause your business to go to shit, so it's one of the two. Just so happens that like I figured out what works. I do more of that, and then that's what kind of keeps me going.
I love your use of the word asymmetric. So I think in like entrepreneurship and investing and wealth creation circles at like kind of the JV level, there's a lot of talk about like diversification and like using like a fund strategy to be protected, and maybe you get a little bit of alpha, a little bit of outsized upside. But all wealth, all success, whether it's LeBron James or Warren Buffett, has been created through asymmetric risk, putting too many eggs in one basket. Ultimately, that's where like outsized performance happens. I'm seeing you play a different game. You're making a bigger bet on yourself. You clearly have a pretty high tolerance for delayed gratification. Is that something you've thought about before?
Yeah. I think there's two things to that. One is, you have to understand it's a long game. And, listening to people like Gary Vee, for example, who would say, hey, play the long game. Don't worry about the short, the short-term things that people are always concerned with, and that the people with the longest time horizon win. And if you think about, if you follow the right people, this goes back to our beginning of our conversation, like following the right people and listening to the right people, like all these people who you talk about on Twitter and all these things, like a lot of them will tell you the same thing over and over. It's like, long time horizon, patience, and, being impatient with your daily activities, but patient with the with the macro, right? And thinking bigger. And so in the beginning, that sounds like just hocus pocus because you're like, man, I need to get paid now, right? Because our industry is very transactional. It's like, hey, what's your pipeline this month? Oh, it's not good. Well, you're not good. Okay, well that's a hard business. Like you're as good as this month's sales. Okay, so wait a second. All that 20 years of service doesn't matter. Well, that's literally the industry treats you that way. I mean, we just saw Clay. We saw a billion-dollar company, multi-billion-dollar company, fold this year. Right? What was it? Finance of America, a public company, just closed the whole thing. All that value evaporated. Why? Because sales went down and they didn't manage it right, or I don't know the whole details. You probably know, but like that's crazy to see something that was valued so valuable. All these people just gone, and so that's this industry. And so, like, I thought, hey,
It's the other side of asymmetric risk, though,
yeah,
and it's
it is.
it is like a lot of business operators, especially mortgage banks by design, you use leverage as part of the model, and that is asymmetric risk. It's just the other side. It doesn't always the
Doesn't work
delayed
out.
gratification, the long horizon, the creative thinking doesn't always work out, but in some scenarios it does.
So I think here's the answer to the question, and many people would understand this or could maybe get a better understanding because of this. When you think about personal brand and marketing, in the beginning, you don't have to think about it as financial risk. It's just your time. So what do I have to give up? Well, I got to give up a hobby. I got to give up Netflix. I got to give up, whatever, maybe I have to go to work all day. And then at night after my kids go to bed, I'll spend 2 hours working on content. That's how I did it in the beginning. And then kind of doing both things, right? People start side businesses all the time because they're passionate about something and they didn't necessarily have the time to do it, right? But they made the time, right? So it's really just your time in the beginning. It's not like it costs a lot of money. You already have a phone. If you don't have a light, it's $100. If you don't have a mic, it's $100, right? So you can start with just what you got and just start unlocking the knowledge and then practice. Like you suck at first, you get better. It's just reps. Like when I first started speaking, mouth goes dry, I could barely talk, right? Very awkward. And then a couple of years later, you're like, okay, I got this, right? You don't get nervous, right? So it's just the same thing on video. So I'm thinking like, hey, in the beginning, it's just your time. And then you'll get opportunities that come up along the way where, yes, there's an event coming up. Should I go big or should I go home? And I'm like, well, I'm going to go big. And the confidence to do that comes from the micro wins along the way. So I think you got to get some wins because that builds your confidence and your risk tolerance. Because now you've already made small bets on yourself and you came through, and now you can make a bigger bet.
How do you think about like self-auditing though, in a scenario where you have you have the entrepreneurial mindset, you're willing to make bets, you're willing to bet on yourself, you're willing to have a long-term mindset, but I've done things that have failed and I've said, all right, time to cut it, on to the next one. And I'm sure you've had the same experience. And I kind of I follow a lot of originators on social, and there's some people, that are a couple of years into content creation and it just ain't getting any better.
Yeah.
So how have you self-audited, and how have you thought about like, all right, I'm trying this tactic, I'm going to see it through, I'm going to do it for 6, 12, 18 months, but there's a point where you have to cut bait and move on to the next tactic that is going to get that you might be better at. So how have you self-audited and thought about what are you great at, what are you not great at?
Yeah, I think that's a great point because you might be going, you might be going in the wrong direction. And then now you're going further away from your goals, right? And you have to cut that off and get back. So I think here's how you could do it. Obviously, it takes time. So you want to give it enough time. But at the same time, if you're not seeing any traction whatsoever, you're not getting the business results, then you need to pivot and you need to work on improvement. So for me, when my stuff was not reaching people, I was like, how do I get it to reach more people? How do I learn more? Okay, so I was constantly obsessed with like trying to figure out how do you make this work and pivoting. And I see a lot of people, to your point of like, hey, they've tried it and it's not working. Well, maybe you didn't pivot. Like maybe you didn't improve. And then for some people, maybe you're just not going to be great on video, and that's okay. Maybe you're great at writing. Maybe you're great at like, you don't even have, one thing that people don't realize is on social, you don't even have to be in the videos. You could shoot what's on the other side. I know real estate agents who are deathly afraid of being on video, and they just started simply highlighting properties and talking over it or just putting music over it. I mean, that's a simple strategy, literally like in Texas, right? There's a lot of people that do that.
Yeah, there's like a guy who's like doing videos like between like Waxahachie and Frisco and like these amazing houses that are expensive here, like seven, 800, $900,000. But like people from the coast look at and they're like, oh my God, this is like a $10 million house, and it's not in Waxahachie. But yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, you don't even have to be in the videos, right? Or you could write, or you could, curate, or you could partner up with people that are great on video, right? And you could do something together where you run the back end and they could be the public facing person. So there's all kinds of ways around it, but I think like, yeah, if you don't have traction, you gotta pivot and figure out. And then the other thing is if your stuff is working, you'll know. Like people will reach out. I mean, even when I had a small audience, people would reach out and say, "Man, I love your stuff." And it's not just like once in a while. It's like, hey, you're getting kind of consistently decent feedback, and the feedback is not just your parents or your sister. It's like, hey, random people you see are telling you that they like your content, and then now you get empowered to do more. And so you should see those like hints along the way.
And it doesn't take hundreds of thousands of followers to
Yeah.
change your business and change your outcome if you're selling real estate or selling mortgages and in certain markets. I'm like, let's go back to Waxahachie or Waco, for example. If you're hitting hundreds of realtors every single week, you could own that market. And the vanity metrics might not be what you see from social influencers, but it doesn't mean it can't work for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, because people in content are used to like viral tweets and viral YouTube videos and viral reels and TikToks. Okay, well, that's cool when it happens. Let me give you the truth of the matter when that happens. Half the audience is overseas. Okay, when something goes viral, if I look at the real analytics on Instagram, half the audience is in freaking India and China and Europe. Like, okay, well, those people are never going to do business with you. It's cool. The number looks cool, a million views or 100,000 views. Okay, so let's immediately discount half of that. Next is they're in different markets all throughout the country, whatever. So like I've had honestly more impact from videos that didn't do well according to the algorithm, but the right person saw them. So like you said, it's the business partner in your market that saw that video, or it's a friend of a friend or a client that watches your stuff. For example, like on Instagram, I found I get the most conversations started from Instagram stories. Instagram stories only reach a fraction of your audience. At best 10%, sometimes 5% of your audience when you get to big numbers. So really, if you have 100,000 followers, it looks cool. When you post an Instagram story, you're not reaching anywhere near that. You're reaching 5,000 people, 3,000 people sometimes. And so that's not that many, people. That's 3%, 5% of the audience. And that's if you do it well, and it's even lower. And so you have to put it in perspective of like, these are your most engaged people that watch your stuff. You're staying in contact with them. What other efficiency could you have? Like where you could just literally open up your phone and in 15 seconds relate with 1,000 people. Like that is the real number of the people who are actually engaged. And if it's 10 people in the beginning, that's still efficient. If it's 100 people, it puts it in perspective, especially when you look at live events. You've been there, you're sitting on their stage and you're looking at 100 faces it's a lot of impact. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, no, events are, I can relate with you there. I mean, they're a high impact, high risk, high reward. The emotional high on the end of a successful event is something that's like hard to replicate anything else in business.
100%.
It's a cool thing to do. So as we talk, it's clear that you are a pretty strategic person. You're thinking about where you're headed, and probably have some pretty clear goals as you look forward for the next 3-5 years. Like what are you building toward? Like where do you want to be, and how do you want to see your origination business change? How do you want to see your content education business change? Like what are you working toward?
So we want to keep making doing more of the same. Like, hey, and sometimes I think about goals in a different way. I think about, hey, how could I help people this week? And I'll remind myself like, teach something today. I have a reminder on my phone that says teach something today or help somebody today. And, so yes, I have great big goals, but then at the same time, those don't mean anything if you're not doing the micro things every day. Right. So, it's obviously stay focused on like continuing to do the things that have served me well, which is, teach and post things and help people. Right. And then the other part of it is like, how do I make a big impact within the industry? So initially it was like, hey, you could recruit, you could, build your sales team and help more clients. Right. You could, but now on the education side, I could help thousands of loan officers get more clients. Like if you know what I mean? So I'm going to do both for now, but I'm thinking like longer term, there's probably more impact on the education side. And then on the loan side, continuing to work with the people who have been loyal to me, you know what I mean, who have helped me and I want to help them. So giving those people outsized return for sticking with me, meaning like, hey, if I've got LOs that have been working with me, I want to see them, really do well, right? I want to do everything in my power to make sure that they do well because they've been with me since kind of the start, and I think loyalty is a big thing. So I want to help people who have worked with me and then obviously make a bigger impact on the education side. I think, next step is obviously what I've noticed on education is it only goes so far and events only go so far if there's no action, right? And there's only going to be a certain percentage of action takers. I get that. That's why it works, right? Because most people don't do anything with the information. That's the status quo. But what I want to do is help people take those action steps. So, doing things that are not scalable. Like, okay, I have an event that's micro. Nobody even knows about it really. Where 10 people who are in the education program, which has over 1,000 people, come to my office for a weekend. And we literally go through the entire playbook and shoot the videos together with my entire media team, the best of the best people I've worked with in the whole time. We all get together on a weekend. And that's just for 10 people. Now that can't be scaled because I can only do it with so many people. But it's cool because when those 10 people leave, they've got their stuff dialed and they leave with actual videos. It wasn't just education. It was like, no, we did the thing that Neel talks about.
And it's part of surrounding yourself with the people that inspire you, and you're teaching them, but you're also probably learning from them as you go through this process.
Yeah, it's super fun. We workshop ideas, hey, like give us an idea of a content. Like let's learn this framework of how we write really compelling hooks for videos. And then one of the guys in the class who's brand new to this comes up with something amazing that I didn't even think of, right? It's cool, just the collaboration. And he probably wouldn't have thought of that at his desk in front of his, Encompass screen. He had to get out of there and get around, like you said, around people who are thinking and talking about marketing. And now all of a sudden he's inspired because we've spent the last 2 hours writing, hooks. Same thing, like, you get into that zone. I think it's called the flow state for creatives. They always talk about that. So when I want to do a lot of writing for Twitter, for example, I got to get like the right frame of mind. So I'll have to like, hey, put some instrumental music on, sit down in a quiet spot, give your mind some time to think. And then all of a sudden you have no ideas. 20 minutes later, you have a ton of ideas. It just starts coming to you. So you can definitely so what I think about future is like doing more high impact things like that. They're not necessarily scalable, but they make an impact because those few small people are now going back to their markets totally different with new information and action taken.
As you think about the people you need on your team to get to the next level, and I love the message of loyalty, seeing the LOs that have been with you for years continue to grow and scale with you. What do you need those people to learn to help you take the business to the next level? Or what do you need on the content side? Do you have to recruit more or train people more? Like, who do you need around you to be the Neel you want to be in 5 years?
Yeah, it's definitely help, like from the obviously salespeople, meaning like, hey, loan partners that could help you originate. And as you get more opportunities, you may not have time for all of them, right? So you want to still take care of clients that get referred to you. You need more help. You got to hire more people. I've noticed that was one thing I ignored at the beginning of career of like, I didn't understand the value in culture and people. Like, how do you build a good team? And then how do you retain these people, right? Because they're not all like you. Like I was always like, hey, why isn't this guy working so hard? Or why isn't this gal doing this? Because they're not like you, bro. That's why you're the boss. You know what I mean? Like that's a hard lesson. Yeah. Like what motivates them? Well, what I found is not always money, right? And you know this, like it's like having fun people to work with, being part of a mission, serving people. Like I remember us having a conversation at my event and the team was there and we're like, they had just worked like, 7 days that week, no time off. And some of the days were like 12-hour days. And we got to the end of this thing, like you said, it's like kind of like a high, like, hey, we did it, team. And I was like, well, the only way that we were able to put in that level of work and not get burnt out and tired, I know you'll probably be tired tomorrow, but right now you're still, on this energy kick, is because of the purpose of what we were doing. We were making a really big impact and it was working. And so you'll find that you'll get these people to rally around you and do that. So yeah, doing more, building really good culture, good people, not just growing for the sake of growth, but finding like the right people on your team is super important for me. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is like, I think you could grow so fast that shit breaks. You know what I mean? I've seen that happen. Even when I went from like that one event to 10 times bigger, a lot of things broke along the way. I figured them out and I learned many lessons. Some are costly lessons, but like you do learn that, kind of a measured growth approach can sometimes be important as well.
And I go back and forth between the desirability of measured growth and growth at a rate that causes growing pains. And I think that you earlier mentioned like a level of pressure. Like there's like a bell curve where if you don't have enough pressure, you're not growing, you're not being successful professionally, you're not being your best self. Then there's a level of pressure that's like optimal, that's like pushing you and your team and the people around you to achieve everything they possibly can and operate at their fullest. And there's a level of pressure that starts to become counterproductive, and like stress builds to the point where people are ineffective. We're ineffective. You get less healthy, you get less energy. But I think that if you can figure out your personal bell curve or the right amount of pressure, for me, that is a pressure level where there are growing pains and things break occasionally. But I don't know. It's something I think about a lot.
Yeah, and what's cool about this is you understand, because you're an entrepreneur. You started ventures, and like you said, some have failed, some have not worked out. Part of the pressure and that you like or you become accustomed to is not knowing how it's going to work out. So sometimes someone will say, "Well, what are you going to do this and this?" I don't know if it's going to work, but that's part of the fun. Like, and I have a high, odds that it's going to work out when I do something. But like you said, there's probably going to be some stuff that doesn't work. Maybe there's some change coming that I'm not even ready for. Maybe somebody's going to cancel on me, the day before they're supposed to be there. Maybe other shit's going to happen. Someone's going to quit or some bad things, knock on wood, but shit happens. So like not knowing and then being able to like still pull it off when these things happen, that's like part of the fun too. And you might think of that as like, oh, that's stress and pressure. Maybe you like that, you know what I mean? Like you said, there's a pressure that's optimal for you, and maybe that's part of the excitement, because if you knew how everything was going to work, that would be kind of boring for me. You know what I mean? Like it would just get boring. I don't know some weeks what we're going to be doing. Like if I think about a year ago to today, I had no idea I'd be doing all the things I'm doing today, but that's what's cool. Like and next year, the fact that that's a possibility for the next year is exciting. It makes you like pumped to keep going.
Well, the good news is we both operate in the housing and mortgage industry where we're change and not knowing what's around the corner. It kind of seems to be the norm. So I think we found our optimal sector for the right amount of pressure.
Yeah. I was going to ask you before you wrap too, like when you talk to all these people, because you have, connections within the industry, probably at the highest level. What do you see in terms of the business going for the rest of the year? Because the common sentiment I'm seeing is like second half of the year, things are going to shift. Like you even talked about, hey, your event in the fall might be the start of that shift.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple themes that, I'm thinking about and hearing commentary on. It kind of sucks to say, but I don't know if we've seen the worst of some of what we're going to see in the market. So, we might not really be at the trough point yet, as, if we see a slower spring home buying season and lower volume, we're probably going to see a little more consolidation on the lender side, and that might not be M&A. Like some of this might be more failed lenders, and some we're kind of calling walkover recruiting, where teams are just kind of walking over to another bank, and there wasn't a transaction, nobody got paid, but at least the originators have a home. So that's I think that's a dynamic we have ahead of us. That's going to result in kind of continued pressure on the rest of the ecosystem. And the vantage point that I have is there are players who did put cash in their pocket over the last few years and prepared for a rainy day, have balance sheets that are ready to be aggressive when other people are fearful, and others that just aren't prepared. I'm starting to get the sense of the people who are starting to kind of like wrinkle their hands and like think about like, all right, it's time to start recruiting aggressively. It's time to think about our M&A pipeline. It's time to start thinking about technology innovation so we can be a winner and a fast leader into the next cycle, and other people that are going to be sitting on their hands and be cash constrained. So like I feel that's the vibe I'm getting. The one theme that I've heard several executives talk about in the last few months is the mindset of decide and commit. Like we don't go back and second guess our decisions. We don't go back and do Monday morning quarterbacking. Like we decide we are going down this path. We're reducing costs, and that's the right thing to do. We're recruiting originators, and that's the right thing to do. We're investing in technology, and it's the right thing to do. Once leaders start second guessing themselves as we get new CPI reads or Jerome Powell has some cryptic message, that is when organizations fall apart. So I think it's a really important time to decide and commit and lead your team forward. If you're leading a 3-person person content team or a 3,000 person origination team, stability and commitment is going to be really important to decide who succeeds in 2023 when there is so much uncertainty in the market. That uncertainty can't be reverberated through leadership and ownership of businesses in the housing industry.
That's huge. One of the things I heard too is lack of communication too. Renee talks about this a lot, narrative gap. And we were going through this shift. And I know a lot of people at other organizations, because I have friends at different organizations, they were telling me they haven't heard from anybody at the executive level. And we're going through this massive shift, the biggest shift we've seen in a decade, the hardest period we've seen in over a decade. And I haven't heard anything from anybody. And I need some help. I need some support. Maybe I just need some freaking shoulder to cry on for a minute. Whatever that is, you got to speak up, man. You got to let people know where we're going, what we're headed, what we're going to do. We're going to get through this. And so I think that's a huge piece of this whole leadership thing as well.
Yeah. And even if that message is stay the course, and that's something I've been working on organizationally. Not every town hall, not every communication, not every email to the whole company is a change. Sometimes it's stay the course. Like we have the strategy, we've decided, and we committed. Keep selling, keep operating, keep creating. That is the message that I have for my team. And I talked to a few originators, like I'm kind of the painful side of the industry in the last few weeks, who heard from executive teams on a Friday that like, all good, just keep going forward. And then Monday there's a transaction announced and like the company is no more. Like that's the kind of BS that I think will like ruin operators for the long haul. And if those people pop back up running mortgage banks in 6, 12, 18 months, like God bless them. There's nobody following them in that direction. So I think honesty is incredibly important, but sometimes the message is just, we've committed, we are going forward. This ain't going to be easy, but stay the course. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah, that's huge. I agree 100%.
All right, Neel, thank you so much for giving us a kind of a look behind the scenes into your life and your journey as an entrepreneur and content creator and leader. It's been a lot of fun for me to see you grow over the years that we've known each other. And I admit I'm one of those people dropping into your DMs like, yo, Neel, what's that mic? What are those lights?
Yeah.
Like, how do I look as good as you on camera? Come on, man. So thanks for all you do for everybody in the industry.
Yeah, man. Happy to do it. And thanks so much for this episode. I think this is definitely a lot of fun, a lot of value in here too for people.